Hi, I'm Joe Adorno. I'm the first single gay man in the state of Florida to legally adopt a child out of foster care. I'm going to share my story with you. Disclaimer, I'm not going to say the names of people who are awful, but I will say the names of people who are awesome. So like I said, my name is Joe Adorno. I'm the owner of YOLO Mentoring. YOLO Mentoring is a social service agency working with kids in child welfare. Go buy my franchise, we're franchising. But I'm here to tell my story about how I adopted my first son and the discrimination that I had from the department. Now, I was a dependency case manager. I worked as, for those of you who don't know, that's a case manager that works with kids in child welfare, also known as foster care. So I remember I had a supervisor and I was just brand new into this particular field. Prior to that, I had worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice, and prior to that, I had worked with the homeless as a case management. And so working in dependency was a little different. And my supervisor, I worked on a few cases, and they realized that I worked really well with the teenagers. I'm also like a big kid at heart, and I kind of stay up with like pop culture and whatnot. But I remember my supervisor handed me this case, and she said, this is a very special case. I think you'll do well with it. Little did I know, 3 years later, I would be adopting him. But anyway, so I met this kid. He was 14 years old, and unfortunately, he witnessed his mother get murdered in front of him. There was no family member that could or was appropriate to take him. We did try to place him throughout the time with family, and it just didn't work out. He was still in high school, and I remember I just got really close to him. I also was a hip hop dance instructor at a studio, and I would bring him to class with me. We had an all boys hip hop class, and I would take him on Wednesdays, and then afterwards I would take him to get some Chinese food, and then I would drop him back off at his group home. So I'd spent a lot of time with this kid, and he got close, and I thought in my mind always, I was like, man, if I was ever going to adopt a kid, I would adopt him. I remember one of the attorneys came to me, the child legal services attorneys, and came to me and said, Joe, I don't know if really aging out is thing. Does he want to be adopted? I was like, no, I don't think he wants to be adopted. And she was like, well, go ask him if he wants to be adopted. We need confirmation. I was like, okay. So the next time I saw him, I was like, hey, do you want to be adopted? And he was like, by who? And I was like, oh, like just in general, would you want to be adopted? And he was like, no, I don't want somebody coming to the group home and picking me up and being like, oh, you're my son now. And all of a sudden, I have to go live with them and I don't even know them. And I was like, well, hold on. It doesn't happen like that. I was like, it starts with, you have to meet them, they meet you, you also have to consent to the adoption, then it would start with supervised visits, then it would be unsupervised day visits, and then it would be overnight weekend visits, and then eventually you'd move in, and then they wouldn't be able to finalize the adoption until after you moved in, but you would already have gotten to get to know them. And he looked at me, he used to call me Mr. Joe, but he would always say, Mr. Joe. So he was like, well, I would, the only way I would do that is if you adopted me. And I just looked at him and just stood there. And so he straight up asked, and he said, would you adopt me, Mr. Joe? And I had already thought about it, but now it became real, And so I said to him, give me a little bit to think about this. And I said, I'm not saying no, I'm not saying yes, but let me think about this. Give me about a month. I went back to the attorney and I said, he said that he would only be adopted if I adopted him. And she was like, great, we're going to change his goal to adoption. And I was like, wait, I didn't say I was going to adopt him. And she's like, well, it doesn't matter. He's open to the idea of adoption. We're going to pursue that option first because that's better than him aging out of foster care. And I was like, okay. But within that month, I was processing. I was like, I'm still in my early 20s. I can't adopt. And I was like, we're almost the same age. And I sat there and thought about it. I was like, when I go to McDonald's, I have to buy for two. When I go to the store, I have to buy for other. This isn't just somebody visiting for the weekend. This is permanent. And so I remember sitting there thinking, I was like, you know what? If this is what he wants, then this is also what I want. And that boy waited for a month to the day and called me. And he's like, hey, Mr. Joe, it's been a month. What did you decide? And I was like, let's do it. If you want to be adopted, I'll adopt you. And so he was like, okay. And so I was excited. I was like, okay, I'm going to adopt this boy. And I remember the first person I went to when I was like, cool, we're going to do this, was the vice president of that company. Now, again, this was a nonprofit. They're still around, but that vice president is no longer there. And I remember I went to her and I was like, hey, I want to adopt this kid. And she pulls me into my office and she shuts the door behind me and she says, I don't support gays adopting, and I want you to stop this nonsense. And I didn't know what to do. Now, this was in 2011. Now, in 2010, it was illegal for gays to adopt in the state of Florida. It straight up asked on the questionnaire, are you a homosexual? And if you said yes, you were disqualified. It wasn't until this couple in Miami who were taking care of this girl, as a couple, they adopted. And they were the first, and the appellate court of Florida overturned it so that they can adopt. So here we are just a couple months later, it's 2011, and I'm ready to adopt. And I remember I didn't know what to do. And so the vice president said to me, I don't support gays adopting, and I want you to stop this nonsense. And I was shocked. And I just sat there and I was like, okay. And then she walked out of the office and I was angry. So I went over to the director's office and I was like, hey, I want to adopt this kid. And she was like, well, you can't. And I was like, well, I can, because the appellate court overturned it and now gays can adopt. And she was like, oh, that was just a Miami thing. That was a city ordinance. That wasn't a state law. And I was like, so then transfer his case to Miami and have them have the jurisdiction, and I will drive back and forth for the court hearings. And she was like, we can't do that. And now, to me, the two top people at the agency, I didn't know what to do. And I felt very defeated. And I remember walking into my supervisor's office, and his name was Eddie White Jr. And I went to my supervisor and I said, Eddie, I don't know what to do. And I was like, I want to adopt this boy, and I just got told no twice. And he said, does he want to be adopted by you? And I was like, well, yeah, we had this conversation. And he was like, do you want to adopt him? And I was like, well, yes. And he goes, then the only person who can tell you no is the judge. And I was like, well, and so I explained to him what happened with the two, and he goes, then we have to go to HR. And I was like, I don't know what HR is going to do. HR defends the company. They're not going to defend me. And so he helped me set up a meeting with HR. Stick around for the next part. We're going to get to the next part, I promise.